Have you ever wondered where the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place? Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your host, Brian Berneman, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world. We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers. From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and I have the pleasure to be joined all the way in New York in the United States by Ashley Riley. Thank you so much, Ash or Ashley, for being here, for taking the time. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation as I have followed some of the content that you've been sharing throughout time. And I really would like to go deep in some of those areas. But before we do that, I would love for you to share a little bit about you and who you are and what you do.
My name is Ash Riley. As you mentioned, I am based in the East Coast in the US. I consider myself an advocate for trauma-informed business, trauma-informed spirituality. I spend a lot of my free time creating content on Instagram, educating people about some of the ills of online business coaching and the spiritual and life coaching wellness industries. And just trying to kind of give people some guidelines on how to really evaluate coaches or information that they may be, coaches they may want to work with, information they may be engaging with, to kind of pinpoint various red flags that they may want to be aware of. And I also give a lot of people tips on how to do ethical business from a spiritual standpoint, from an anti-capitalist standpoint, anti-racist standpoint, really just kind of like an anti-oppression framework. So yeah, that's me. That's who I am.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ash, for that. And I want to go into a couple of the topics. I'm going to start with the fact that I'm in this industry of, let's call it coaching. I don't like to call myself a coach, partly because of what I see coaching has become. And I have actually struggled a little bit with every time to communicate how I work with people. And a lot of times when I see content like what you're sharing, I resonate a lot with, oh, this is what's, like challenging for me and what I would consider wrong and unethical in that space. And that comes partly for two reasons. One is, that's part of my work. Like I'm there supporting people and working with people. And B, the fact that I haven't done like a typical training to be a coach, which in my experience, it teaches a lot of people how to sell and how to get people to work with them as the main part of what they are doing. And that's the part of it that I find it really challenging, because I know that I do have the tools if I want to manipulate people. This is when I did my postgrad in neuroscience, I realized most of the people that were there were people that the big corporations were sending to learn how to manipulate people. And I'm like, oh, this is not good. This is like a really challenging thing to be a part of, but I wanted to get that knowledge. So what is the state that you see, just to give a little bit of for everybody listening, what's the state of that space that you're seeing, and what are the biggest challenges that you're seeing in that space?
So, kind of had this conversation from multiple angles. There's this crossover between coaching and online business, right? And I don't think that there is something necessarily inherently wrong with coaching. It's when people get sucked in by online business coaches that things start to take a turn for the worse. And so my background is in marketing and advertising. My degree's in journalism. In my career, I started out working at two different ad agencies. Then I went client side working in tech. Then I had my own business as a marketing, branding, business consultant for early stage tech startups. And it's funny because I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who is kind of aware of the coaching space, and she is a legit like copywriter who works in marketing and advertising. And we were talking about the way that people sell online, specifically in the coaching industry, and specifically how business coaches teach you to sell. And our assessment of it as people who actually, you know, come from this profession is like, this is like the lowest form of marketing and advertising. Like, these people are literally just teaching you sales. They're not teaching you marketing. They're not teaching you branding. They're teaching you how to use sales psychology to manipulate people into making a purchase. That's literally it. Like, this is like the bottom of the funnel, high pressure manipulation. So I would say that the way that the industry operates is very much skewed to this sort of like very bizarre extreme. You know, for me, working with a much bigger brand, they would never do a lot of the things that people in online business do. And I think the reason why it is the way that it is because you have, you know, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when online business was first really becoming a thing, you had a lot of people entering that market looking to get rich quick. And this is how they did it. And because they were some of the early pioneers of this, and then they turned around and started to teach people this, everybody who came after them just thought, oh, this is the way it's done. And, you know, those of us who have experience in a lot of other industries are like, no, this is not, this is not how it's done. And that's not to say that marketing and advertising aren't inherently manipulative, because they are. But it's not to this degree. So a lot of what I focus on is trying to educate people about, you know, exactly where this manipulation happens and how to recognize it. But I also want to say that the manipulation aspect of it is the thing I think most people are aware of, but that is not the only piece to creating an ethical business by any means. Like, that's the most obvious piece, I think, because people see it, they feel it, they experience it. But there's so many other aspects to ethical business that require us to really step outside of our own actual cultural conditioning, particularly, especially in America, where everything is very consumerist focused. And it really requires you to sort of like turn everything upside down and inside out, and understand how and why the way that we think about business is really rooted in things like white supremacy and rampant consumerism, classism, all of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and I mean I would love to go into some of that, because this has been, at least for me, in my own like path. I got into this space not because I wanted to, in a sense. I wasn't looking to get into this space. I went to learn about myself. Like, that was my exploration. I was like, I'm going to go and travel the world. I'm going to go and explore all of these different practices that most of them come from the East, or back in Argentina, where I grew up, as a spiritual, let's call it, practices, but they are practices to come back to ourselves and to be present. And I worked a lot on myself through those years. And then by extension of that, I just started sharing, and I started working with people and with businesses. And one of the things that I realized was a lot of times within, especially once I started to come to more of this coaching space, how a lot of the things that other people were doing, because I was like, okay, like if I'm working in this space, I need to learn, what do I do? And I was seeing most of the things that I was seeing, and I'm like, no, no, no. Like I had this thing that, okay, this is not about, like, I don't need to share about getting rich. I don't need to find people and to say like, oh, you're not going, like, you're not living to your full potential. Like, you should be giving me that money so that you can give that money. And then I was seeing a lot of practices as well, that I think that are quite interesting. That is about, as you're saying, and how this bridge is a challenging one, how a lot of this spiritual or abundance or different topics like that got into this space, but are like seen from a very different lens, and are actually coming from a scarcity space, and are actually hooking people and shaming people and not allowing people to actually experience that. Is that something that, on the things that you were saying in terms of the ethical or that like white supremacist or even patriarchal standpoint of where these things come from? Is that a little bit of where you're going with that?
Yeah, I one of the reasons that I kind of started talking about this stuff is because I do like have a very spiritual like practice. I've been considered myself on a spiritual path for, maybe over 10 years now. And like when I got into this stuff, it was not very mainstream yet. And the mentality around it and the narrative around it was very different than it is now. Um, you could really see where sort of like this Western capitalist lens had merged with all of these spiritual concepts. People really latched on to the whole law of attraction thing, the money mindset stuff. And it's all like it it really turned me off when I started to see this stuff. When I started to see like, crystals in West Elm and Deepak Chopra with his home decor line at ABC Carpet at Home, it was just like, this doesn't feel right at
Mm.
all. You're commercializing something that is really deeply important to people. And it just felt very gross to me.
Mm.
And also it was, you know, I think a lot of where my spirituality rests is kind of like in different forms of Buddhism, where it's like, materialism isn't a distraction. It's never going to bring you happiness or fulfillment. So to see a lot of these sort of spiritual concepts be very much wrapped around materialism and chasing money and status and finding a higher place in the social hierarchy was just like, wow, this is completely the opposite of what is supposed to be the point. So yeah, that kind of stuff just really got under my skin, and I got to the point where I was like, I just can't sit and watch this anymore.
Mm.
And it was also interesting because, because of my business background, also watching a lot of these coaches talking about business in ways that were just flat out wrong, or it was like obvious that these people had no real business background. Um, so it just seemed like a logical step for me to
Mm.
be like, no, wait, this isn't right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got into this stuff.
Mm. I think that there's something and in the space, at least for me, which has been really interesting in the last like 15 years, that I see my practice and I see spirituality, but just, I mean, everything in general, as something sacred. And this is, like your your work that is in my sacred space. I love that because I think that that is something that has been potentially lost when this is happening, when we are bringing this to a very capitalist, commercialized aspect. This sometimes gets lost. And I find it a lot of times that it's been quite challenging to see how a lot of people get actually sucked into seeing something that I can clearly see, oh wow, like this is not what they are selling. Like these people are not like what they're selling. These are all easy tactics, and as you're saying, like super basic tactics to get people. But in the doing so, I think that as well, I have no idea what they are doing once people are in their programs because I have never been hooked into one of them. But I'm not sure if people are getting to connect with that sacred space within themselves and what they are looking for, or if what they are just getting is more of that same fluffness.
From what I hear, I mean, I get stories from people all the time. It sounds like a lot of it is just fluff. Um, it's very this is an industry with a culture that is very much about rapid commercialization. It's like, I go and I learn something over the weekend and the next week I'm selling it like I'm an expert. Like there is no deep integration, there is no real learning or experience behind it. So like how could they offer any kind of deep value because they're only operating from the very surface level of what they've learned.
Yeah.
I see that with the business side of it. I see that with a lot of the coaching side of it too. And the spiritual side, I every time you turn around, somebody is like, I'm a business coach and an energy worker and a relationship coach and this and that. It's like, how have you possibly, and you're 29 years old, how have you possibly mastered all of those things to have the ability to offer it to a client? It's just not possible.
Mm. Yeah.
So
Yeah, go.
I was just gonna say, I think people, they have this mentality that you only need to know 10% more than the person you're coaching to be able to be a teacher to them. And you only need, 4 to 6 months to learn anything, and then you can turn around and teach it. And that's just not the case for a lot of things.
Mm. I think, and this has been within the space and the yoga space and the spiritual space, it was a challenge for me. Now I relax into it, but like 15 years ago, I came out of living I lived for a few years in a Buddhist retreat center. And I came out of there and I was seeing a lot of my friends that suddenly like were like, oh, I'm just going to go and do like a month teacher training and now I'm teaching this and I'm like, oh, okay, like that's all that it takes. Like you knew nothing and now after a month now you're teaching people. And I mean, this is for me what I relax into is like, okay, different people, different things. I'm not actually wanting to judge different people and how they go about it, and perhaps they are great teachers. Like I cannot judge it if I haven't experienced it, but just that mentality of that quickness, I think that it's a really interesting experience.
Well, and the thing is like when you do that, all you can teach is you're still going through the motions. So all you're teaching other people to do is to go through the motions. You're not actually able to take them deeper. It's like I said, it's just a very surface level understanding. And I mean, anybody who's been in a spiritual practice for a prolonged period of time has to understand that like there are layers that you go through, that you dig deeper into, and it takes time. And so it just, if you're only able to teach from the depth that you've gone yourself.
Mhm. Yeah. I wanted to ask before we slightly change avenue. I wanted to ask for you to share what are some of those red flags in terms of like if someone is looking into, let's say, okay, I have heard like I need a coach, like, you know, like what are some of those red flags? One of the red flags that I see, I don't know if this is one of the ones that you have, is the people that keep on sharing on social media, like this happened to me, you know, a really hard thing, and now I mastered it, and it's like, and now I can teach you. And I'm like, either these people are the most unlucky person in the world, and everything that has happened to them in the last year or so, like they lost this, they lost that, this happened, but suddenly like everything they learned and now they can teach you. Is that one of the red flags that you see, or what are others?
That's the formulaic hero's journey that brand storytelling will teach you to utilize to sell to people. It's you make yourself the hero of your own story, and now you're going to be the guide for whoever is buying your services. It's if it's an authentic thing, I don't necessarily think it's a red flag. But when you see this sort of like formulaic, repeated message over and over, you have to kind of become aware that, yeah, this is just a story these people are telling. It's not actually a real thing. I think for me, the bigger red flag is, how does this message make me feel? Does it make me feel ashamed? Does it make me feel not good enough? Does it make me feel like I have not achieved anything? Or does it make me feel like there's more that I should be doing? Anything that makes you feel a sense of lack in any way is probably a red flag. Because what happens a lot of the time is that these people don't, you'll hear terms like niching thrown around in online business. And what a niche actually is a need in the market that you are serving. So it's like you've done your market research, you see that this group of people have this common problem and they are looking for a solution to that problem. So you devise the solution to that problem and then you go market it to them. So what happens in the coaching industry a lot is that people don't have a niche that they're serving. They just randomly wake up one day and decide, I want to sell this service, but they've done no market research to see whether or not there's actually a valid need. And when there's no valid need, then you have to create a need. And so that's where all of the emotional manipulation comes in, where they have to make you feel like you're not enough so that you then need them. And that is one of the biggest things that I see happening in this space, is that people aren't focusing on, what am I actually trying to do here? Is there actually enough people out there who want what I'm trying to sell? They're just trying to magically create this need in people and get them to buy things that they may not even necessarily require.
Yeah. Yeah. I find it really interesting a lot of times that I keep on getting a lot of messages on LinkedIn and different places like, do you want me, like, I can get you like 50 calls per week and stuff like that. And I'm like, and what am I going to do with that? Like, am I just going to spend my time selling to people? Like, for what? Are these people actually wanting to work with me? This has been one of the things, I have talked to many marketing people through the years, and there's some really, like nice ones, but most of them have been super, like salesy and mainstream in the way that they work. And I'm always like, I can't work like that. Like, I can't go and get people. If people want to work with me, especially if they've been referred by the people that I have worked with in the past, wonderful. And then just meeting with them and being like, okay, this is what this is how I work. This is, like how I guide people, especially given the fact that I have been fortunate to explore a lot of different methodologies. And you talked about trauma informed before, and I wanted to touch on that. Like to be able to understand that and to work with the unlearning and the work that needs to happen for them to come back to a place that they feel okay. And this is one of the things that I keep on telling a lot of times. I'm not promising anything. Like, I'm not promising you like money. I'm not promising you a relationship. I'm not promising you anything other than I will do my best to walk beside you and for you to do your work, whatever that looks like for us. And I feel like a lot of times this is one of the things as well that for me in this space that has been really interesting is all of that perspective of the sales, but as well like the promises and the as well and the lack of knowledge. And I think this what I want to go next is with this trauma informed perspective is there's no knowledge of that, and they can actually a lot of times make things worse for people.
So when you're talking about the people, offering to get you so many leads a day. So I have an ethical entrepreneurship online course that I developed with a collaborator. And this is one of the things that we talk about is like, you have to make this fundamental shift in your mindset and in your business goals in order to make a business ethical. And one of those shifts is you have to understand that normal marketing, and especially online business marketing, people are very concerned. Their main goal is to make as much money as possible, as fast as possible. So they take a quantity over quality approach. And that's why they're trying to throw all of these leads at you. And in order to, that's going to result in burnout. You're going to be dealing with people who aren't even remotely a good fit for your business. It's going to result in more unhappy customers. So what we want to do is we want to flip that on its head, and we want to take a quality over quantity approach. So we teach people to basically build like a very slow, sustainable business based on building actual relationships with people, referrals, word of mouth. That's the best advertising you could possibly get. And it's all about actually getting to know people and actually making sure that they are a good fit for your service. And then they're going to be more satisfied when they leave, and they're going to be more likely to refer more people back to you. And yeah, this is going to take longer, but it's going to be much healthier for you. It's going to be much healthier for your business. It's going to be much healthier for your clients, because you're putting them at the center of everything and not just money. Mm-hmm. And so this is a big piece, I think, of trauma-informed business too, because trauma-informed business is all about putting the well-being of your client first. You want to basically just focus on giving them as much autonomy as possible, because most people who've been through trauma have lost their sense of autonomy. They've had their power physically taken away from them, whether it's by events or if it's by abuse, abusive people, whatever. And they're having to like relearn how to be in control of their own life. And when you're working with a really pushy coach who wants you to do everything their way, all you're doing is reenacting the same power dynamics that they experienced with their abuser. And the thing is like, most people have some kind of trauma. There's varying degrees, different kinds, different types, but most of us have experienced some kind of trauma, and especially in a power dynamic. Oppressive systems are power dynamics. So anybody who's not a white, cis, hetero male has experienced some level of oppression and loss of power in a relationship with society itself. So we have to be really aware of what these power dynamics are, how they operate, and how we uh, play into those in our one-to-one relationships in any kind of like dynamic that you're in.
Yeah, I often share with everyone that like I struggled a lot when even like I teach at the university here, and I struggle a lot whenever someone says teacher because I know the unconscious power dynamic that happens there. And that's why like when I'm teaching at university, like we sit on the floor on a circle because I want my students to understand I'm not more than them, and there's no, I mean, like I understand I'm there to to impart some knowledge and to enable the learning or the unlearning mostly to take place. Yet those dynamics are really interesting, and a lot of times when I'm working, and I've been fortunate to learn about a lot of the systemic work and how to include that in what I'm doing. Everything, as you just said, even for those like the white male like insist, everyone has had trauma. There's people, yes, way more like capital T trauma. There's people with a little t. We have all experienced some kind of trauma, and we're all needing to look into that and to process that in whichever way, stage, speed, and manner that would look for each of us. And this is one of the things that I think that a lot of times within what we're talking, that the need for something to go faster is fascinating for me in terms of that. It's like, what's the need to go faster here? Things will take their own time. And if something, like I had a session the other day with one of my the people that I work with, and I said like, well, she asked me how long is it going to take, and I was like, I have no idea. Like it could be processed and integrated today, or it could take a few months. Like I don't know, and I'm like,
It's up to you.
yeah,
Yeah, it's up to you and your comfort level and how fast you're willing to go, and I think speaking in my own experience with trauma, I would push myself way out of my own comfort zone because I had no idea what my comfort zone was. So a lot of times even the clients themselves don't know what is too much, too fast, too soon.
yeah.
And so you as a facilitator have to be really aware of those dynamics for them to a degree and be really willing and helpful to help them navigate that in a way
Mm.
that feels.
Yeah, and one of the things, and I wanted to touch as well on this in terms of the ethical business perspective. I don't know if this is something like I haven't seen it in your work, but it could be there because there's so much that you're sharing. I talk with most of the people that I work with and my students. Most of them are female. Um, that's in the well-being spiritual space, that seems to be the biggest amount of people, and one of the things that through the years I realized is how our system is set up for like the masculine, of course, and everything is go go go. And I kept on working with them and asking them, especially for the ones that work 9 to 5 work, how are they working within their own cycles? Because like for women, every week is a different cycle. There's a different energy level, there's a different creativity level, there's different needs. And at work, usually that's not seen or explored. It's everything is like you just need to go go go. And I keep on sharing with them, like, have you even asked to your manager, like, can you work with those things in place? Can you work 1 week with more of the creative stuff? Can you work 1 week with more of the admin stuff? Like, and just see how this can actually fit in your own cycles and moods. Is this something that have you ever come across?
So, yes, but where I typically see this message is from a lot of women in the sort of like womb healing polarity space, but they're actually using it to reinforce stereotypical gender roles because they're saying women aren't designed to work a 9 to 5 job. Men are, therefore women should
Mm.
stay home with their children. And they're kind of ignoring the fact that nobody's built for a 9 to 5 job. Like capitalism isn't natural. A 40-hour work week is hard on everybody. So it's yes, I have seen it, but it's kind of being used to sort of reinforce the existing status quo rather than break out of it.
Mm. Interesting. And what are some of the things that you see in terms of, ethical businesses? Is there within this, like I often find this really interesting, the paradox of like, well, within the system, is there a way to actually be completely ethical?
No, not within capitalism. You can make your business as ethical as possible, but because you require other businesses to run your business, unless those businesses are also running an ethical business, you're still at some point you end up supporting people who are exploiting their labor or are doing some kind of unethical practice. So it's really, one person is not going to be able to change the system. It has to be a complete and total culture shift. Um, but it also, I think, will have to come from the bottom up, because corporations are profit driven, period. You know, you're starting to see a lot of corporations kind of incorporate some kind of social responsibility and some kind of social awareness. But at the end of the day, if they really want to walk the walk, they're going to have to take a hit in their profits. And that's their overriding objective is profit. So it's in direct opposition to their reason for existing.
Yeah.
So until, enough people make the connection about why we have all these problems in the world and what actually is creating those problems and tie it back to the fact that we put money over and above everything, we're not going to be able to create a new system.
Mm.
It really has to start with our values and shifting our values. And so
Yeah.
that's the thing that I'm most passionate about, I think, is showing people, because I know a lot of people who are in denial and they are lying to themselves about why they're in business. You see it everywhere. People say, "Oh, I'm here to help people. I'm here to help women make more money," but really it's about you making more money. And until you admit to yourself that that's what it's about, you're never going to really truly change anything.
Mm. Yeah, this what you're saying reminded me. I went to this event last year or 2 years ago, and there was a representative of a big brand here in New Zealand, and they were talking about all of the social responsible things that they were doing. And I asked them this question, and everybody in the room, turned quiet. I asked them, like, how big of the percentage of their profit was everything that they were putting into the social responsible things that they were doing. And of course, no answer. And I was like, well, like, great what you're doing. These people and those communities, what you're helping, great. But at the end of the day, you're destroying all of that. And it's like, it's just as well as you're saying, the system is set up in such a way that it's hard for a lot of those things to actually make sense. And until, as you're saying, we get real of what's the actual perspective, what's the actual goal there. Is it to make money or not? Like I see it with my work a lot of times. I struggled for many years to even charge for what I was doing because I thought, like I'm being of service, and I didn't want money to be a barrier to me being of service. And then I was like, I can't survive like that. I need to charge. And it's been a really interesting space for me to navigate. Like I need to make money because I'm living here now in this space, and I need to pay rent. I need to pay for food. I need to pay for a lot of things. So I need to make sure that I make this much money. So I need to charge for that. And it's been a really interesting space to navigate within me to understand, okay, this means that now I cannot be of service to everyone because there's a barrier for just entry.
So I think we talk about this in our course too, but number one, the way most people talk about money in business is either you're afraid to charge or you're charging high ticket. And what nobody talks about, literally nobody talks about, is understanding enough. Like, what is enough? So if you're undercharging, you're not making enough to support yourself. But if you're charging ridiculous amounts of money, you're charging way more than you need to. You're taking more than you need. So how much do you actually need? That's the foundation of building the rest of your business. It's like, okay, I know that I have to make this amount of money in a year to pay my rent, to have food, to be able to take care of myself, and to put a little bit of money in savings, for retirement or emergencies or medical bills or whatever. But you don't have to be rich. You don't need to be a millionaire. No, nobody needs to be a millionaire. I mean, unless you live in like the most expensive country in the world where $1 million is like what it takes to survive. It's about finding enough, because we know that money can only buy you happiness insofar as it can meet your needs, right? Like the moment that you have your actual foundational needs met, the margin of return on how much happiness that money brings you becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's like, okay, what is enough? Where do I feel comfortable? What is comfortable to me? And then examining, what is my relationship to status? What is my relationship to this hierarchy? Am I trying to like be more than other people, or am I just trying to have enough for myself? Like that's a really big piece of it, I think. And I think because of capitalism, because of the scarcity that is inherent in it, all of us have some serious issues around figuring out what enough is and what enough feels like.
Yeah.
I would love to see more people doing somatic work and mindset work around that than, your typical money mindset of, oh, you just need to charge your worth. Your worth cannot be quantified with a dollar amount. Okay.
Yeah, I was actually I was working with someone the other time. I work a lot somatically, and we were working around that worth. Like she came talking about something about work, and I'm like, okay, let's let's go to the body and let's work with your worth. Like, where is that lack of worth because of that thing with work? Like at least in my perspective, our worth doesn't fluctuate. Like, we are worthy. We might not be experiencing that. And that's where, we need to come back and explore that.
Inherently worthy. You're inherently worthy. You're worthy because you exist, because you are.
Yes. And that's the interesting thing that I keep on sharing. Yet, we need to actually experience that. And as you said, like, because we had so much trauma and so many different experiences, that we have learned and have conditioned us to believe that our worth is outside. It's based on what we're doing, based on status, money, whatever their success level on this capitalist world is telling us. Most of us don't experience that. And that's why for me it's so important to come back to the body and to be able to unlearn and to process and integrate all of those parts that are just, as you're saying, coming back to what you inherently are. And this is, for me, with all of the years that I have been training in Buddhism teachings, it's like, well, we are all inherently Buddha. We're all inherently enlightened beings. We're not experiencing that. We don't know that, yet we are.
Mm-hmm.
And as one of the last things that I wanted to ask you is, do you see, especially within the coaching space, but just in general, in terms of ethical business, any regulations or anything that is coming for that?
I
Or
mean,
does it need to be self-regulated?
it's coaching is a global thing. So, regulation is based on a country to country basis or a state to state basis, depending on where you are. The thing is, what I find for example, coaching in the United States is subject to consumer protection laws at the federal level and at the state level. But the thing is, a lot of people aren't following those laws. They're actually literally breaking the law. But because there's so much naivety, a lot of the people that these business coaches, again, like I said, the business coaches themselves don't have any real legitimate experience in business. And the clients that they're working with are also people who don't have real legitimate experience in business. Thus, that's why they need a coach. So none of them are aware of the actual laws around running a business. So these people are allowed to prey on this other group of people because both of them are completely ignorant of laws that are being broken. Because these people are never going to get in trouble unless somebody reports them, right? So there's just like a lot of ignorance around this kind of thing. And then that's another big piece of like what I try to do is to raise awareness about this stuff. Because I went to college for what I do, and because I worked in advertising agencies, like it was drilled into us, these are the rules. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. This is illegal. We could be sued. Mm-hmm. We knew that. We had lawyers that told us that. But a lot of these people in the online business space, it's the Wild West. They don't know anything. So there are laws that are governing these groups that they're just not even paying attention to, first of all. And then secondly, like, yes, there are some regulatory things being brought up because people in the US have died at some of these sort of spiritual retreats. And in New York, there's a law that's being passed with regard to this stuff. California is usually never too far behind. So some of the more progressive states that are quicker to regulate different things are probably going to end up creating some regulations fairly soon. But again, if nobody in the industry even knows that the regulations exist, they're still not going to follow them. So, it really, I think the crux of the issue is that there's not a regulating body. Like there is no board where you have to get certified like there is with like, if you want to be a lawyer, you have to pass the bar. If you want to be a doctor, you have to pass a certain medical licensing board practice. So like those kinds of things don't exist for coaching. I don't know that those things will ever exist. They might, like, one group might create their own certification or whatever, and you can say, okay, well, I know that this specific group has a good vetting process, so I'll work with a coach who's been certified by them. But I don't know that the entire industry will ever experience something like that. The European Union's pretty progressive. They may do something like that. for themselves, but I don't foresee that really ever happening in the United States.
Yeah. Well, I think that,
yeah.
yeah. Well, and unfortunately, a lot of times not it's not unfortunate. Like a lot of times, it comes back to us as individuals and to inform ourselves and to be able to have a good sense of judgment. Like I know based on my childhood and based on like doing my bachelor in journalism that I learned a lot about questioning what I'm reading, where is it coming from, who is saying this, what are they claiming this, and I can make an informed decision whether I believe that or not. And unfortunately, most of us haven't learned that, and most of us are ignorant and susceptible, as you say.
Yeah, a lot of people, like especially Americans, have very lacking critical thinking skills. And to a degree, it's because of our education system. Like we're not taught to think that way. And it's unfortunate, and people who've experienced trauma also, like that affects your ability to make good decisions and to really be critical of information that you are reading and understanding. So it's like, to a certain degree, it's like people are allowed to prey on individuals' naivety. And, I hate that people always come back to, well, it's up to the individual. And it's like, yeah, I get that we don't have any other choice, but it's also not fair.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to continue talking with you for much, much longer. But we're running out of time here. So for everybody that is listening or watching us and is interested in checking out more of your work, where can they do that?
You can find me on Instagram or on Threads, the new platform at Ash Rising, and my website is inmysacredspace.com.
Beautiful. And there's so many articles there. So if you're interested and resonate with any of this, go and check it out as well. If you have experience with any of these topics that we've been talking about and you would like to continue the conversation, leave us a comment, whatever it is that you're finding this episode. Thank you so much, Ash, for taking the time and for the work that you're doing in educating on these topics as well.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for being here, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Bye!
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.